morning, and welcome to Live Without Limits. Your breakthrough starts here. I'm your host, Davida Shinsky, and this podcast is dedicated to helping you to break through limitations, strengthen your mindset, and fully step into your potential. Today's episode is titled Ways to Empower Yourself, Reclaiming Your Confidence, Voice, and Personal Power. At some point in your life, everyone feels disempowered. Maybe it happens after failure, maybe after rejection, maybe after being overlooked, dismissed, or criticized. Or maybe it happens gradually through stress, doubt, comparison, and self-neglect. Over time, you may start feeling less confident in your decisions, less certain in your voice, and less connected to your own power. But here's the truth. Empowerment is not something that you wait for. It's something you build. You don't need permission to feel powerful. You don't need perfect circumstances to regain control of your life. Empowerment begins the moment you decide to take your power back mentally, emotionally, and behaviorally. So in today's episode, we're going to break down practical, real-world ways that you can empower yourself starting now. So let's get started. What does it mean to be empowered? Empowerment is often misunderstood. It is not arrogance. It is not control over others. It is not the perfection or dominance. True empowerment is internal, and it is the feeling of, I can handle my life, I trust myself, I have a voice, I can make decisions, I can influence my direction. Empowered people don't wait for life to change before they act. They change before and how they respond to the life. They take responsibility, not in a heavy blaming way, but in a freeing way, because responsibility is where power lives. When you stop blaming external circumstances for everything, you reclaim your ability to respond, adapt, and grow. Empowerment is not about controlling everything. It's about controlling your mindset, your actions, and your choices. The importance is to understand this, that when we're talking about empowerment, we're talking about how you can take control of your life, not how you can control someone else's life. Because when you try to control others, you are not doing yourself a favor. What you're really doing is you're creating an environment where it breeds jealousy, it breeds hostility. And this is where the family relationships break down, because in too many ways, parents will turn around and pit one child against another and try to use that to overpower the one that's not as strong. So once you recognize what it is, how it affects you, what you're doing, then you and how others can have power over you, then you're more willing to understand and learn how to take back that power that is within you and control your life destiny, and not allow others to try to control it for you. Now, the root of disempowerment. To understand empowerment, we have to understand what it takes away. Disempowerment often comes from self-doubt, fear of failure, overthinking, people-pleasing, past mistakes, criticism from others, comparison to others, lack of boundaries. Each of these weakens your sense of internal authority. Over time, you begin to ask others what you should do instead of trusting yourself. Delay decisions out of fear. Avoid speaking up. Shrink your presence. Question your instincts. One of the biggest causes of self-abandonment, and this happens when you consistently ignore your own needs, your own tuition or truth in order to avoid conflict or gain approval. Every time you abandon yourself, you reinforce the belief, my voice doesn't matter. But empowerment begins when that belief changes. This is why I will often say that parents need to allow their children as they age to take on more responsibility, because this is how they learn to see themselves. Remember, a 2-year-old, what is a 2-year-old doing? They're at that stage where they're beginning to feel some of their power, but you can either encourage them or you can recognize and allow them to be who they were meant to be, or you can turn around and you can overpower them. And that's why children at certain ages begin to test the boundaries, because yes, you have to keep boundaries on them, but you have to know what is age appropriate and how to allow each individual grow at and take a little bit more of their own power as they get older, so that as an adult they learn how to live their life and not fear failure, and understand that when something goes wrong, use it as a learning experience. Don't try to take your child and criticize them for making mistakes. Use it to help them to learn, to experience what it is that they need to learn in order to live the best quality of life and live their life to the fullest. Because as parents, we don't want to be alone in our old age, but here's the kicker. If you hold that child back and make them dependent on you, yeah, they will be there for you in your old age, but when you're gone, they're lost. They don't know what to do to take care of themselves. And unless there's someone else there that's willing to teach them how to be the person they were meant to be, this is why it is so important for a parent to allow a child to grow, to experience things, to learn how to be independent, to learn how to make decisions for themselves, how to feel empowered over their own life. Now, let's talk about reclaiming your personal power. Reclaiming your power starts with awareness. You cannot change what you do not notice. So ask yourself, where am I giving my power away? Where am I seeking approval instead of trusting myself? Where am I staying silent when I should speak up? Where am I tolerating more than I should? Awareness alone begins the shift. Then comes choice. Every moment you have two options: stay the same or act differently. Empowerment grows when you choose differently, even in small ways. For example, saying no when you usually say yes, speaking up in a conversation, making a decision without explaining, setting a boundary, following through on a commitment. These small acts rebuild internal authority. Power is not regained in big moments. It is rebuilt in repeated decisions. Often, what someone will do is this. Because they grew up in a home where they were dependent on someone else, they will stay in their comfort zone rather than try to learn to empower themselves and to learn how to be the person they were meant to be. And what do? They choose someone who they think is going to replace that adult in their lives who is their parent. And often that is why they end up in a toxic environment in themselves in an abusive relationship. We don't realize just how much that it is important for us to learn to take control of our own lives, to build self-respect. And by building that self-respect, then you can become the confident person that you were meant to be. It is so important to understand that you have the power to make yourself happy. You have the power to begin to live the life you were meant to live. You, as we age, certain things that we learn, whether we learn to drive, whether we learn how to manage other people, how do we learn to communicate more effectively, all of this is built into where we are, who we are, how we relate to the world around us. Now what I want to talk about is how to build confidence through action. Confidence is not something you think your way into. It is something you act your way into. Many people wait to feel confident before they act, but empowerment and empowered people understand action comes first. Confidence follows. Every time you take action despite uncertainty, you send your brain a message, I can handle this. And that message builds evidence over time, examples of empowering actions. Starting before you feel ready, speaking even when your voice shakes, trying again after failure, learning new skills, taking responsibility for mistakes instead of avoiding them. Each action builds trust in yourself, and trust is the foundation of empowerment. We're talking about empowerment. We're talking about taking control of your life. Look at it this way. You have a goal. If you break that goal down into smaller chunks, into daily activities, and complete that, you're feeling success along the way. You're gaining a way to empower yourself, to teach yourself, to believe in your own abilities, in your ability to succeed, in your ability to make the right decisions, in your ability to manage money. All of these makes you a more confident person in how you see yourself and how you relate to the world around you. And this is where how we can take better control of our lives and learn how to have good, healthy relationships. You're seeing so many divorces now of older people, because if you look in the past and how society was, that when a child was disciplined, it could have passed the border into abuse. But because society didn't acknowledge at that time what abuse was, guess what? This is this is how a parent controlled their child and tore down their self confidence, tore down their self worth, and tore down how they lived their life. And then what happened is, well, men were expected to go out, hold good jobs, support the family, and live a good life, while the wife is supposed to take home. And if you remember, during World War II, what happened? Men went to war and women had to take those jobs. For the first time, women were learning how to be empowered instead of being beaten down. And now we're supposedly in a more equal empowerment environment between men and women. But now we're also seeing people trying to tear down those advances that we've had and take us back to a time when women were made subservient. Well, women are more are the ones that are starting businesses today as opposed to men, just because they've learned and they're more educated today. And how and also what we're seeing is technology has helping us in the workplace and actually learning. And you're seeing more and more young people become more empowered. And as different generations get to that point, we're going to see more of a society that is respectful of one another, because what we're seeing today is a lack of respect, not only between sexes, but also between peers of all ages, and how people see people with disabilities, because they see them as weaker and they see them as someone that they can literally abuse and get away with it. And more, life is changing, and how we change depends on how we relate to ourselves and the people around us. Now, let's look at the power of boundaries. One of the most important ways to empower yourself is through boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are guidelines that protect your energy, your time, and your emotional well-being. Without boundaries, you feel drained. You feel resentful. You lose direction. You overextend yourself. With boundaries, you feel clearer. You feel stronger. You feel more focused. You respect yourself more. Every time you enforce a boundary, you are saying, my needs matter. Empowered people do not and are not afraid to disappoint others when it means staying aligned with themselves. Because they understand discomfort is temporary, self-betrayal is not. Okay. Wow, I just lost my background. And anyway, let's get back to what we were talking about, which are boundaries. And let's help you understand why those boundaries are so important. Here's a situation. I had a mother who was constantly someone who was abusive. and didn't understand what boundaries were. And this truly made her, she had, she grew up in a home that was very negative. So she didn't know how to be any different than what she was or who she was. Understanding that during this time, it was a situation where she got to the point of being someone who was didn't understand what boundaries are going on or how to relate to those boundaries. She, she could only think one way and one way only. This is why understanding how these boundaries are, how you need to set boundaries. And one of the things that I had to do was I had to learn that the home I came from was very negative and to stay away from them. That's why on several occasions, because I grew up with a disability at a time when society treated their disability community as though they were a negative and didn't exist, I had struggled to find gainful employment. And when I tried to start my own business, I virtually started with very little money. And building a speaking business is very difficult and I joined Toastmasters and I joined the National Speakers Association. And the National Speakers Association is a support system for speakers because what they do is if you're out there alone, at least you know other people and interact with people who have been very successful that can help you get ahead. And they can be a good support system. But if you come from a family or have a spouse or someone who doesn't support your goals, then you're out there alone. Understanding where you're coming from or why that is so important is why and how you can take yourself to that next level to live the life you were meant to live and leave the message that you want to leave. One of the things that I did was I was successful in starting a podcast back in its infancy and have seen how the industry has changed. And if you look at the last 50 years and how technology has helped not only advance but open doors for people with disabilities in the workplace, you can understand just how important having and setting boundaries is because you do not want to allow someone else to dictate your life. You need to learn to take better control of your life. Now, let's talk about shifting your inner dialogue because this is what and how you take better control over your life. Your inner voice shapes your outer life. If your inner dialogue is critical, fearful, or doubtful, your actions reflect that. And how that is that when you hear things over and over again from the outside, you internalize it. And then you start repeating it in your head over and over to yourself. Understanding why and how you have allowed other people to control yourself allows you to take back that empowerment to change how you speak to yourself. Then, instead of, I can't do this, try saying, I'm learning how to do this. Instead of, what if I fail? Try saying to yourself, what if I succeed? Instead of, I always mess things up, try saying to yourself, I am improving through experience. Empowered thinking is not a fake positivity. It is constructive truth. It acknowledges reality while still supporting growth. Your internal voice should not weaken you. It should guide you forward. So letting go of approval. And this is how you are beginning to take better control over your life is you're learning how to think for yourself. You're learning how to begin to live the life and take back your power and not allowing others to have power over you. One of the biggest barriers to empowerment is the need for approval. When you constantly seek validation, you lose clarity. You hesitate. You second guess yourself. You shrink your potential. Empowerment requires a shift from what will they think to say to yourself, what do I think? From do they approve of me to am I aligned with myself? Not everyone will understand your choices. Not everyone will agree with your direction. But empowerment means you stop outsourcing your self-worth. You begin trusting your own perspective. Daily habits that empower you. And this is what and how to take better control over your life and how you think and how you live the life you were meant to have. Empowerment is built daily. Here are simple but powerful habits. Keep small promises to yourself. Build trust through consistency. Make one uncomfortable decision a day. And this means moving out of your comfort zone, not allowing yourself to feel and stay right in that point where you are because growth happens outside your comfort zone. Reflect instead of regret. Learn instead of self-criticizing. And this is how we diminish ourselves is by criticizing ourselves. Speak up more often. Your voice strengthens with use. Take responsibility for your outcomes. Even mistakes begin and become learning tools. And that is what we're trying to do, is help you learn how to use failure and different experiences that you do, because as you begin to allow others to take control over your life, what are you doing? You are allowing them to you're taking away from yourself your own empowerment. As we close today's episode of Live Without Limits, remember this. You do not need permission to be powerful. You do not need perfect confidence to begin. You do not need approval to take your next step. Empowerment is not something you find. Through choices, through your actions, through your boundaries, through self-trust, through your willingness to show up, even when it's uncomfortable. Every time you choose yourself, you become stronger. Every time you trust yourself, you become clearer. Every time you act despite fear, you become even more empowered. You are not powerless. You are not stuck. You are not without options. You are capable of reclaiming your strength, starting now. So thank you for joining me in today's episode of Ways to Empower Yourself, reclaiming your confidence, your voice, and your personal power. And so till next time, keep showing up, keep choosing yourself, and keep living without limits. And remember this, that It is up to you to take better control of your life, to live the life you were meant to live, and to learn how to empower yourself to make the right